G'day everybody, welcome to another Affinity Photo tutorial. This week I've got another fantasy composite for you. This is the photo that we're going to start off with. So as usual, let's get started. First thing we're going to do is come right down to our background and add an exposure and clip that to the background. So I've got that clipped and we'll just darken that background up a little bit. And we can come back and tweak that a little bit later as well. So we've got our background, we've got our exposure. Next thing I'm going to do is add in this picture of the silo that I've got here. I've named it silo. So what I will do is just blend that in a little bit better, and I'll just use a mask on that. Clicking on my mask, over to my brush here. Make sure I'm on a soft brush. The color that we're going to be using is black, and I've got a flow of about 25%. I'll just make my brush a little bit bigger, zoom in a little bit, and let's just blend that into the bottom there a little bit so we don't have that harsh line on the bottom. And that looks pretty good. Command 0 to get back to normal size. While we're here on our silo, I will add a exposure on that as well. Clip that and we'll darken that down a little bit as well. And while we're here, we'll add another exposure, and we'll do this quite a bit. On that one, we'll make it nice and bright, and we will invert it. We'll come back a little bit later to add the highlights, and we'll do that on quite a few of these as well. So the next one I'm going to do is just add these front pipes. If I come over here to my move tool, and I've just put two of them in a group. So you'll see they're just one pipe, and I've just added them together to make two and put them in a group. So on that one, we will add an exposure as well onto the group and darken those pipes down. Okay, I've made two other groups, and that is the left and the right pipe as well that I've got here. And again, we will add an exposure to each of these and darken those down a little bit. Do it to the left pipe as well. Add an exposure, clip it, and darken that one down as well. So we've got those pipes in place. So the next thing I'm going to do is add my two characters here. So I've got my soldier and my robot. Now these two figures are from the Big Bad figure pack from NeoStock, and I've just added some color to my soldier and to my robot, just using a pixel layer on overlay and just painting in where I wanted the different colors. So I've got my figures in place, and I'm going to do the same. On my soldier, I'm going to add an exposure, clip that and darken my soldier down a little bit. Going to add another exposure on my soldier, clip that and brighten that one up. And again, I'm going to invert that, and we'll come back later to have a little bit of a play with that. On the robot, we'll just add an exposure and just bring that down a little bit to about there. It looks pretty good. Okay, we need to add a few shadows. So on my soldier here, so right underneath my soldier, I'm going to add a pixel layer. I'm going to make sure I'm painting in black. I've still got that soft brush, so I might drop the flow to about 25%. Going to zoom in, and with a very small brush, just going to add some dark colors under her feet here on my soldier. Just make that dark. Zoom out a little bit. I'm going to make my brush a lot bigger, and then I'm just going to add my shadow for my soldier. Just stretching off into the distance. You can also just drop the opacity on that a little bit if we need to. Going to do the same on my robot. So my robot here, pixel layer. Want it underneath my robot. Again, I'm going to zoom in, very small brush, and just along my robot here. Just going to add that shadow line in there as well. Going to add a little bit of shadow along there. And again, another sort of big brush, and then just brush in that shadow. So that's not looking too bad at the moment. Maybe drop the opacity on that as well. Again, we can come back and tweak that. So I'm just going to call that R shadow for my robot. And this one we'll call S shadow for the soldier. So on my soldier, I want to add a little bit of a face mask. So I'm going to use this picture of this bubble here. And I've just taken just this front bit. So if I turn that on and turn it off, you can just see I've just taken that front bit of the bubble. I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to change the blend mode to screen. And then I'm going to turn that round. And I'm just going to fit that bubble to the soldier's face. So I'm just going to make that a bit smaller. Turn it round. Just fit it over her face there. Let's turn that down a bit so we can just see her face. And let's just come to about here. That looks pretty good. But what I'm going to do is just grab my erase brush. The flow is about 15%. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. Just going to take some of that off her collar there. And just blend that in. So I'm happy with that. We've got our little face mask in place. We can drop the opacity a little bit more if you'd like. And that's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to come down to the background and just tweak that background a little bit more, a little bit darker. There we go. So now I want to add a little bit of an atmosphere to the background of my picture. So I'm going to turn on this smoke layer that I have here and change the blend mode to screen. I'm going to copy it, Command J, and I'm just going to have these. I'm going to stretch this one out a little bit, just moving it up, move this one up as well. I'm going to group these two together with Command G and just call that smoke. And I'm going to drop the opacity to about 25%. And on that group, I'm just going to grab my smudge brush tool. The flow is at 25%, and that's okay. I'm just going to smudge that smoke a little bit. And that's not too bad. We might be able to just turn the opacity up a little bit. Maybe about 30. More smudging up the top there. So I've got those swirls. Okay, I'm happy with the smoke. So, okay, I want to add a little bit more atmosphere in the background here. So just underneath my soldier here, I'm going to add a pixel layer. I'm going to come up here to my brush, click on my brush here, come over to my brushes. I've got these cloud and mist brushes. You could probably just use a nice soft brush for this if you want to. And I've got my color white. Just going to make that big. And I'm just going to click all the way behind the soldier there, right across. Just sort of a little bit of mist or smoke. And then on that pixel layer, I'm going to add a live filter, a Gaussian blur, and I'm going to blur that quite a bit. About there, looks pretty good. Let's call that mist. And we can drop the opacity if we want a tiny bit. That's not looking too bad. Okay, so I've got our mist in place. Okay, and now what I want to do is I want to put some sort of like green fluid, which is leaking from our robot here. So underneath our robot, I'm going to add another pixel layer, and I'm going to put this as fluid. Fluid, going to change the blend mode to overlay. And I'm going to change to this green color here. So I've got that. Let's just see about 25%. Let's just move up a little bit and let's just paint a little bit of green just around our robot here. Like they're lying in this pool of green fluid that possibly has leaked from inside our robot. Okay, I might change my brush to a sprays and splatter brush and sort of just a fine mist brush here and just add some of that in the back there. Okay, let's have a look at that. Command 0, it's not too bad. So now I'm going to add a light ray coming from this corner. So let's just turn on our light ray coming from the corner here. Just grab my move tool. You can just see that that's just a light ray there. Let's put that back. up into the corner there. Now I'm going to come back to my soldier here, and remember the exposure that we did, the really bright one, so I'm going to use that one now. I'm painting in white on my brush. I'm going to turn my flow up to about 60%, 62%, and I'm going to zoom in on my soldier, and I'm going to start adding some of those highlights. Make my brush a little bit smaller. All the way down. Making my brush smaller again. Just come on the inside here. And I'm going to drop my flow now all the way down to about 15. Zooming in a little bit more, I'm just going to add a bit too much. Let's drop that flow to about 10. Just adding a few more little highlights. Command 0. Maybe a bit more on the back there. Okay, happy with that. While I've got my brush here, I'm going to come down here to the silo. Remember we did the same here. Going to bring the flow up to about 20 and just add some of those highlights in there. Drop the flow again to about 10. Just add those highlights in there, and that looks not too bad. Okay, not looking too bad. So what I might do now is I'm just going to add some dust at the front here. So just some little dust particles, and I've got some right up the top here. So I'm going to add those dust particles as well. And what we'll do now, what have we got left here to do? I'm going to add a selective color. And I'll just turn that on, and you can see what I've got here. I've got it in neutrals, got my cyan at -5 and my magenta at 10. I like that really sort of purpley look that it gives. I'm going to turn on this lens filter from the adjustment layer as well. So this is just right down here, lens filter. Just going to turn that on. Gives me that nice little color again as well. Turn on my curves. And you can see on my curve, I've just done a sort of very slight S curve. So just a very slight S curve. You can have a play and just a tiny bit of flattening the blacks here. So that is my S curve. So let's do one more thing here. Let's right on the top of the curves here, let's add another pixel layer. Let's come over to our brushes. I've got these smoke brushes. So I'm just going to pick one of these smoke brushes here. I think this one here. Make sure that I'm on my brush. Make that brush a lot smaller, and I'm going to bring that opacity all the way down to about 25%. Just going to turn that, just turning these brushes with my arrow keys. I'm just going to add a little bit of smoke, just sort of coming out of these vents here. There we go. I think that's not looking too bad. I think I will drop that a little bit lower, that smoke, about just so you can just see it. That looks pretty good. I think I am going to just add another exposure to the robot here. Make that nice and bright. I think that robot needs a few highlights as well. So just invert that. I've got my soft brush. Got my flow of about 63%. Let's just zoom in. Let's just get some highlights. I just where that light just would be catching, coming through in between the soldier. A little bit of light there would be catching, I think. Okay, let's zoom out. I think we just needed those little few highlights on our robot here. So pretty happy with that. Let's collapse that. Let's come up to the top here. Let's come over to Layer and Merge Visible. And then I'm going to do my usual with my tone mapping here. Picking my detailed one, which is my favorite one, as you would know. Tone compression to 20. Drop the exposure a little bit. Tiny, tiny, tiny bit of contrast. Maybe -1. Drop the saturation a tiny bit and up the vibrance. And I'll just bring these details into the 50s here and hit apply. So there we go, everybody. That is my fantasy composite for this week. I hope you have enjoyed the tutorial. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing to my channel. If you would like to support my channel, you can hit the super thanks link below, or you can head over to the Buy Me a Coffee site. You can also do that there. But until next time, I'm going to say to you, stay well, stay safe, and I'll see you in my next video.